It was a crisp autumn afternoon when I found myself walking through the old neighborhood, hand in hand with my daughter Emma. She had just turned 6, and we were strolling down the cobblestone path that ran through the park, her small fingers wrapped tightly around mine. The air was sharp with the scent of fallen leaves, and I couldn't help but feel a wave of nostalgia wash over me as I gazed at the vibrant shades of gold and red that decorated the trees. This park, this very path, held so many memories for me. It was where I had spent countless hours as a child with my mother, watching the seasons change, sitting under the giant oak tree in the center. I remember her soft voice as she'd tell me about the simple joys of life, how we should always stop and appreciate the little things, like the way the sunlight would filter through the leaves. It was a place filled with warmth, with love, and now it felt like a distant dream. As we walked past that old oak tree, I couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of déjà vu that hit me. The memories of my mother seemed to flood back all at once, and for a moment I stood frozen, lost in the past. Emma tugged on my hand, bringing me back to the present, her innocent smile reminding me that I wasn't alone. She was my world now, and I was doing my best to raise her as best as I could, even though a part of me still felt like I was just pretending to have it all together. We continued walking, the sound of our footsteps the only noise in the air. The park was quiet, and the world around us seemed to slow down as we wandered deeper into the familiar landscape of my childhood. As we turned a corner near the entrance to the wooded trail, I saw her. A little girl, no older than Emma, standing alone near the park entrance. Her hair was a wild mess of blonde curls, and she was wiping tears from her cheeks. Her clothes were a little too big for her, and she seemed so small, so fragile, standing there alone in the fading light of the afternoon. My heart sank, and a wave of concern washed over me. Without thinking, I gently pulled Emma closer and approached the girl. "Hey there," I said softly, kneeling down to her level. "Are you lost? Can I help you find your mom or dad?" The little girl looked up at me, her eyes wide with fear, and nodded slowly. She couldn't speak at first, her small body trembling, but after a moment, she whispered, "My name's Lucy." I gave her a warm smile, trying to reassure her. "It's okay, Lucy. We'll help you. Do you know where you live? Can you tell me anything about your house?" She paused, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. And then, with a hesitant voice, she said something that made my heart skip a beat. "I live in the house with the big red door and the garden of roses." Those words stopped me cold. I knew that house. It was a place from my past, a place I hadn't seen in years. The house with the red door, the garden of roses, it was my childhood home, the very house where my mother had lived. The memory hit me like a wave. I stood up, my thoughts racing. "Let's help Lucy find her house," I said, trying to sound confident, though a part of me felt like something was shifting in the air, something I couldn't explain. As I led Lucy by the hand, with Emma trailing behind us, I tried to shake off the strange feeling that had settled in my chest. The park, which had once been a place of comfort and childhood joy, now felt different, almost surreal. Every step felt heavier as we walked down the familiar streets. I tried to focus on helping Lucy, but my mind kept wandering back to her words. The house with the big red door and the garden of roses. How could she possibly know that? I hadn't been back to that house in years, not since my mother passed away. It had always felt like a place frozen in time, a place filled with memories I wasn't sure I was ready to revisit. But now here I was, walking toward it as if fate had decided it was time for those memories to come rushing back. Lucy seemed to sense my distraction, her tiny hand gripping mine tighter. I glanced down at her, trying to keep my focus on her and not on the growing storm of questions in my mind. She looked up at me with those wide, fearful eyes, her face pale and tear-streaked. I couldn't help but wonder how she ended up alone in the park, but for some reason, that question didn't seem to matter as much as the inexplicable connection I was beginning to feel. I glanced at Emma, who was now walking beside us, her little steps quickening to keep up. She was chattering away about something, but I couldn't bring myself to listen. My thoughts were too tangled, and I couldn't shake the image of the house we were approaching. The place where I had spent my childhood, where my mother had raised me, where we'd shared so many quiet moments together. I hadn't gone back there since her funeral. The memories had been too painful, too full of loss and regret. And now, here I was, heading straight for it, all because of a little girl who had somehow become entwined with my past. We turned a corner, and I saw it, the street I had grown up on. The houses lined up, old but full of character, the way I remembered them. The street was quiet, but it felt like the air had thickened, like something was about to happen. I looked at Lucy again, her small form walking beside me like she was meant to be here. She didn't seem to feel the weight of the moment like I did. She just looked ahead, her eyes bright, as if she was eager to be home. I couldn't help but admire her courage, how she seemed to take everything in stride despite the fear that had initially gripped her. As we approached the house, my heart began to race. It looked the same, just as I remembered it from my childhood. The two-story Victorian with the large wraparound porch, the grand oak tree in the front yard. But what caught my eye immediately was the rose garden. The roses were in full bloom, their vibrant colors standing out against the fading light of the afternoon. It was exactly as Lucy had described. And there, standing at the front of the house, was the red door. The red door that had been so familiar to me growing up, the one that had always felt like a symbol of home. I stopped in my tracks. Lucy, sensing my hesitation, tugged on my hand. "That's it," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of joy and relief. "That's where I live." My pulse quickened as I stared at the house, unsure of what to do next. This couldn't be a coincidence. It was the house where I had spent my childhood, the house where my mother had lived, the place I had thought was lost to me forever. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Let's go see if your mom's home," I said, though my voice felt distant, almost as if I was talking to myself. I was no longer sure if I was leading Lucy home or if I was walking into a memory I wasn't ready to face. As we walked up the stone pathway, I couldn't shake the feeling that something extraordinary was about to happen. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a mystery, one that had been waiting for me to unravel it for years. I hesitated at the doorstep, my hand hovering over the doorbell as the weight of the moment settled over me. Lucy, seemingly oblivious to the storm of emotions brewing inside me, stepped forward with excitement, pressing her small hand to the doorbell. The chime that echoed through the house seemed impossibly familiar, like it had never left, like time hadn't passed since the last time I'd heard it. I could almost hear my mother's voice in my head, calling me inside for dinner, her laugh filling the space where silence had now taken over. The door swung open and a woman stood there, her eyes wide in surprise. She was in her mid-30s, her dark brown hair falling in soft waves around her face. But it was her smile, so warm and kind, that caught my breath. It was the same smile I had seen 1,000 times on my mother's face. The same eyes, the same warmth. But it couldn't be. It couldn't be her. My mother had passed away years ago. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, her voice smooth and calm, though tinged with confusion. She looked down at Lucy, and then back at me, her gaze lingering longer than it should have. "I grew up here," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "This was my house. I lived here with my mom." The woman blinked, taking a step back as though trying to place me. She glanced down at Lucy, who was looking up at her with an expectant smile. The woman's confusion turned to something else, recognition, disbelief, and then, almost imperceptibly, a flicker of something deeper. Her eyes widened as if she had just realized something that defied explanation. "Are you?" she began, her voice trailing off as she looked at me more closely. I swallowed hard, my heart racing. "Is your name Lily?" The words tumbled out before I could stop them, the question feeling foreign even as I asked it. "Yes," she answered, her voice trembling slightly. "But how do you know that?" I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, the weight of the moment too heavy to bear. This couldn't be real. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation, trying to grasp onto anything that made sense. But the truth was, there was no explanation. The connection between us was undeniable. She was so much like my mother, yet she wasn't her. This woman, Lily, was the twin sister I had never known existed. Lily stepped back, motioning for us to come inside. "Please come in. I think we have a lot to talk about." Her voice was shaky, but there was a kindness in it, a softness that made me feel both welcome and unnerved all at once. I stepped inside, followed by Emma and Lucy. The house, though different in some ways, new furniture, fresh paint, still held the same essence, the same bones of the home I had known so well. It was as though the years of my absence hadn't changed the feeling of being here. The floorboards creaked underfoot, and I could almost smell my mother's perfume, faint but lingering in the air. It was the strangest mix of comfort and grief, of memories that both soothed and pierced me. Lily led us into the living room, where we all sat down, the weight of the silence pressing in on us. I couldn't speak. I was overwhelmed, caught in the impossibility of the situation. How could this be happening? Why had this little girl, Lucy, led me here to this house? Why had fate brought me face to face with Lily, the sister I never knew I had? I glanced at Lucy, who was sitting quietly on the couch next to Emma, both of them talking about something, though I wasn't really listening. My mind was elsewhere, trying to process everything. Lily, sensing my hesitation, finally broke the silence. "I don't know where to start," she said, her voice softer now, as if she were talking to herself. "I've always known there was something missing. I've always wondered who my real family was. My parents never told me the truth, and when I lost them, I thought I was all alone." She paused, her gaze shifting between me and the children. "But now I don't feel so alone." I didn't know what to say. The words didn't come. My mind was still reeling from the shock, and yet, as I sat there, I felt something deep within me shift. Something I hadn't realized I had been searching for all these years. Connection, understanding, a piece of the past I didn't know was lost. And so we sat there, the four of us, in that living room, letting the silence stretch between us. But it was a different kind of silence now. A quiet that held the promise of something new, something that would take time to understand and piece together. The past was coming back to life, in a way I could never have expected. And though it was strange, even overwhelming, I knew one thing for sure. This was the beginning of a story I never thought I'd get to finish. It wasn't long before the words started to flow between Lily and me, and the floodgates of confusion and revelation opened wide. We spent hours talking, sometimes stumbling over our own words as we pieced together fragments of the story that had been hidden from both of us for so many years. It felt like I was reading a book that I never knew existed, with pages torn and missing, only to find the missing chapters scattered around me, begging to be put together. Lily's story was as fragmented as mine. She had grown up with a loving family, the only family she'd ever known. She was adopted shortly after birth, and like me, she had always been told her biological parents were unknown. But unlike me, Lily had never lost anyone who could fill the gap in her heart, never had that burning need to know where she came from. For her, it had always been a quiet ache, the kind of longing that settled in over time, like a fog rolling in, slowly dimming the light without ever quite letting her see the truth. As we talked, she explained how her adoptive parents had died when she was in her late 20s, and how after that, she'd tried searching for her origins, but the trail had always gone cold. Adoption records were sealed, and no one would tell her anything concrete. She told me how, over the years, she had let the search go, convinced that it didn't matter as much as she thought it did. But now, sitting here with me, staring at the face of the family she had never known, everything she had questioned, everything she had buried, was rushing to the surface. I couldn't help but wonder why it had taken so long for us to find each other. Why had fate kept us apart for so many years? Was this all just a coincidence? Or was it something more? The question gnawed at me as I listened to Lily's story, as I slowly pieced together the fragments of my own life that had always seemed like scattered puzzle pieces. "Do you ever wonder why this happened now?" I asked, my voice quiet, almost unsure. "Why now, after all this time?" Lily paused, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She looked up at me, her expression serious. "I don't know," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But maybe this was meant to be. Maybe it took all these years for us to be ready for this, to understand who we really are." Her words struck me like a wave, pulling me under and holding me there for a moment. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was the universe, or fate, or whatever you want to call it, giving us a second chance, at family, at healing, at understanding. The more we talked, the clearer it became that Lily wasn't just a lost relative. She was a part of me, a missing piece of my own story. She had lived the life I never got to have, the life my mother had dreamed for both of them. As she shared her memories, I could see glimpses of my mother in her smile, the way she spoke, the way she carried herself. It was uncanny. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was drifting through life without a tether to the past. I had found that tether again. The evening slipped into night, and the children, Emma and Lucy, had long since fallen asleep, curled up together on the couch. They were oblivious to the whirlwind of emotions swirling around us, but I couldn't help but feel like the two of them were the true testament to the miracle of the moment. They were both connected, not just by blood, but by a bond that stretched back generations. I sat there, staring at Lily, and I realized something. This was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for us, but for our families. We had been given a chance to heal, to rebuild, and to honor the past while moving forward together. And while the grief of losing my mother would never truly disappear, I finally felt like I had found a way to carry her with me, not just in my heart, but in the very flesh and blood of my family. It wasn't what I had expected, but it was what I needed. I looked at Lily again, this time with a sense of peace. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for being here, for finding me." She smiled softly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Thank you for letting me in," she replied, her voice filled with something new, something I hadn't heard before. Maybe it was hope. The next few days felt like they were unfolding in slow motion, each moment carrying the weight of everything we had discovered. Lily and I spoke often, trying to piece together the jigsaw puzzle of our shared past. I could see the relief in her eyes as she talked about her adoptive family, how they had been kind but distant, and how she had never felt completely at home. She'd always known something was missing, but couldn't put her finger on it until now, and I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, this was why I had been drawn to the park that afternoon. Why I had walked there with Emma, why I had found Lucy. It all felt like some kind of cosmic alignment, something I didn't fully understand but couldn't deny. The connection between Lily and me was undeniable, like finding a missing piece of myself that I didn't even know was lost. We began to spend more time together, sharing stories and memories, and with each passing day, the bond between us grew stronger. It wasn't just the shared history of our mother or the house we had both known. It was the way we fit together so naturally, the way our conversations flowed effortlessly, as if we had always been a part of each other's lives. It was almost as if I had known her all along, even though the years of separation had kept us apart. I watched as Lucy and Emma grew close, their laughter filling the room in a way that made everything feel brighter. The two of them seemed to find comfort in each other, both of them children who had been searching for something, perhaps a connection that neither of them had fully understood until they met. They played together like they'd known each other their whole lives, their innocent bond a stark contrast to the complexity of our adult emotions. Watching them, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. This was a gift I never expected to receive, the chance to watch our families come together, to see a new generation of love and connection take root. One evening, Lily and I sat on the porch of the house with the red door, sipping tea as the sun dipped below the horizon. The roses in the garden were still in full bloom, their sweet scent wafting through the air, reminding me of something my mother would have adored. I looked at Lily, her face soft in the twilight. "Do you ever wonder how different things would have been if we had known about each other sooner?" I asked, the question hanging between us like a fragile thread. Lily let out a long sigh, her eyes reflecting the last light of the day. "I used to," she admitted. "I used to wonder what my life would have been like if I had known my real family, if I had known about you, about our mother." She paused, her gaze turning distant. "But now, I think I understand. Maybe we needed to live the lives we did so we could come together now. Maybe we had to experience everything we did so we'd appreciate this moment, this second chance." Her words hit me harder than I expected. Maybe she was right. Maybe we had both needed to go through the pain of not knowing, the ache of feeling incomplete, so we could recognize the value of the connection we were building now. There was so much I had lost, but in finding Lily, I realized that there was so much I had yet to gain. Do you think Mom would have been happy seeing us together? I asked, my voice catching slightly. Lily smiled softly, her eyes misty. I think she'd be overjoyed. I think she'd finally feel complete, knowing we found each other. A wave of emotion washed over me, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It wasn't just the past that had been healed in these days, it was the future too. The future we would build together. And as I sat there with Lily, watching the last rays of sunlight fade away, I knew one thing for sure. This was the beginning of something beautiful. Something that, no matter how many years it had taken to arrive, was worth every moment. As the weeks passed, it became increasingly clear that what had started as a strange encounter in the park was now a deep, irreplaceable part of my life. Lily and I spent more time together, navigating this new reality we found ourselves in. The emotions that had once been so overwhelming, confusion, grief, and disbelief, began to settle into something more peaceful, something resembling family. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And in its own way, it was healing. I had always thought of myself as someone who had come to terms with the loss of my mother. But sitting across from Lily, listening to her share stories of the childhood she'd lived without knowing me, I realized there were pieces of me that had been missing too. Her experiences, her memories, filled the gaps in a way that was so natural it felt like we had always been part of each other's lives. As she spoke about her adoptive parents, the love they had given her, and the uncertainty of her origins, I could see how much we had in common. She had built a life for herself, just as I had, but there had always been something just out of reach for both of us, until now. It was hard not to feel a bit of bitterness, wondering what might have been if we had found each other earlier. But the truth was, the past was already written. All we had now was the present, and the future was ours to shape. We weren't bound by what had been lost. We were building something new. The more we talked, the more we understood each other's grief, each other's journey. And perhaps most importantly, we understood each other's resilience. The children, too, seemed to thrive in this new family dynamic. Emma and Lucy had become inseparable. They spent hours playing in the garden, chasing each other around the roses, laughing in a way that reminded me of my own childhood, when I had felt the warmth of family surrounding me. Watching them, I couldn't help but think about how much their lives had changed. Emma had lost a grandmother, but she had gained a new family in return. And Lucy, who had been lost in the park that day, had found more than just a home. She had found a connection that would last a lifetime. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Lily and I sat on the porch again, the evening air cool but still comforting. The roses in the garden were beginning to fade, their petals falling to the ground like quiet whispers of the season changing. It felt like the perfect moment to reflect, to talk about everything that had happened in such a short time. "Do you think we're ready for this?" I asked, my voice tentative. I mean, everything has happened so fast. Our families, the kids, this whole new reality. Lily glanced at me, her expression thoughtful. "I don't know," she said, her voice soft. "But maybe being ready isn't the point. Maybe we just have to take it one step at a time. We've both lived our lives apart, but now we have the chance to be together. That's what matters." Her words resonated with me in a way I hadn't expected. The idea of being ready had always felt like something I had to achieve, something I had to do on my own terms. But maybe, like Lily said, it wasn't about preparation or planning. It was about being present, about showing up for each other in the moment, no matter how unexpected that moment might be. "I think you're right," I said, smiling. "Maybe we'll never feel fully ready, but as long as we keep moving forward together, I think we'll be okay." Lily nodded, her gaze turning to the horizon, where the last traces of the setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and pink. "We've already made it this far, haven't we?" she said, her voice tinged with a quiet strength. "I think that's enough." As I sat there with her, the weight of everything that had happened began to lift, replaced by a sense of quiet hope. The past would always be a part of us, but the future was what we could shape together. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like we were on the right path. Not just for Lily and me, but for our families, for the generations that would follow. The journey we had started was just beginning, and no matter what came next, we would face it together. The days after that evening on the porch seemed to blend together, as if time had become both incredibly fast and excruciatingly slow. I found myself thinking about the future more than I ever had before, about what it would look like for Lily and me, for Emma and Lucy, and for the two families we were now trying to stitch together. It wasn't easy. There were moments of awkwardness, moments when the weight of what we had discovered would hit us all at once, and the grief of the years lost would resurface. But then there were moments of joy, small, quiet victories that reminded me of why this was all worth it. One afternoon, Lily and I decided to take the kids to the park, the same park where I had first met Lucy. It seemed fitting somehow to return to the place where it had all started, a place that now felt more like home than it ever had before. Emma and Lucy ran ahead, chasing each other toward the swings with their laughter filling the air. It was such an innocent sound, one that reminded me how much had changed, how much life had moved forward since that first surreal encounter. Lily and I sat on a bench, watching the girls play, the familiar park surrounding us in all its autumn glory. The trees were bare now, their branches reaching toward the sky like bare fingers, but the crisp air still carried the scent of the changing season. It felt peaceful, more peaceful than I had felt in years. And for the first time since my mother passed away, I realized I wasn't just grieving her anymore. I was grieving the family I had lost, the family I didn't even know I had been searching for. But now, in Lily's presence, in the bond between our children, I was beginning to understand that loss wasn't the end. It was just a part of the story. "I never thought I'd be here," I said to Lily, my voice quiet as I watched the girls giggle from across the park. "I never thought I'd have a family again like this." Lily glanced at me, her eyes reflecting something I couldn't quite place. "I never thought I'd find this either," she said softly, almost to herself. "But here we are, and I think we're exactly where we need to be." There was something comforting in her words. It wasn't the kind of comfort that erased all the pain, but the kind that reminded me that even in the hardest moments, even in the most unexpected turns of life, we find our way. I had spent so many years thinking that family was something I had lost forever, something that could never be replaced. But now I was realizing that family wasn't about what was lost. It was about what was still there, what was still waiting to be built. We sat in silence for a while, just watching the girls. They were so carefree, so wrapped up in their world of make-believe and laughter. They didn't know what had brought us all together, and maybe that was for the best. They didn't need to know the complicated history that had shaped our lives. They only needed to know that they were part of something special, something that would be there for them, always. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. It wasn't the kind of peace that comes from having everything figured out. It was a quieter, more fragile peace, the kind that comes from knowing that you're no longer alone, from knowing that the people you've lost are still with you in some way, and that the future still holds something worth fighting for. "Do you think they'll always be this close?" I asked Lily, my eyes still on the girls, who were now sitting on the swings, laughing together. Lily smiled. "I think they'll be even closer. They'll have each other, just like we have each other now." I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in a long time, and for the first time since we met, I realized that she wasn't just my late mother's sister. She was my sister too. She was a part of my life now, a constant, and I wasn't alone anymore. Our families were no longer fragmented, no longer drifting in different directions. They were becoming whole. As the evening air grew colder and the park emptied around us, I felt a quiet hope stir within me. We were all beginning again, and though the road ahead would have its challenges, I knew one thing for certain: we would face it together. The following months felt like a series of small, quiet moments strung together, each one a reminder that, despite everything we had been through, life was moving forward in a way that I never thought possible. What had once seemed like a tragic, irreversible loss had now become a new beginning, one I was learning to embrace. Lily and I, along with the kids, continued to grow into this new version of family. We spent holidays together, celebrated birthdays, and slowly started to build traditions of our own. There were awkward moments, of course, adjusting to the fact that we were family, but not the kind of family we had imagined. Still, it felt real. It felt like something I had always needed, but had been too afraid to ask for. One Sunday afternoon, Lily and I decided to take a trip to a local cafe that had become one of our favorite spots. It was a small, cozy place tucked on a quiet street corner with mismatched chairs and a long wooden counter where you could watch the baristas prepare their drinks. We had come to this cafe a few times before, just the two of us, sharing conversations that were as easy as breathing. But today, we brought the kids along, knowing they would enjoy the warm atmosphere and the chocolate croissants they always begged for. As we sat at a large, round table, the kids eagerly digging into their pastries and making a mess with hot chocolate, I couldn't help but watch them closely. Emma and Lucy had become inseparable over the months. Their bond was something magical, something beyond bloodlines. It was as if they had always known each other, and the time apart had only been a small fraction of their story. They talked about everything: school, their favorite cartoons, and the games they created in the backyard. It was a beautiful thing to witness, watching their joy and their sense of security, knowing they had found something solid in each other. Lily and I exchanged a glance, both of us silently acknowledging the gift we had been given. "Do you ever think about how this all happened?" I asked, my voice quiet as I took a sip of my coffee. "How we just found each other like this?" Lily paused, her gaze softening as she looked over at Emma and Lucy, who were now laughing over something that had clearly come from their own little world. "All the time," she replied. "I think about it a lot, actually. How the universe works in strange ways. How things happen when we least expect them. Maybe this was always meant to be, and we just had to go through the motions of life to get here." I nodded, her words resonating with me in a way that was hard to put into words. There was a peace in them, a peace that told me everything we had been through wasn't just random. It was a story unfolding, and we had finally reached the part where the pieces fit together. "Do you think Mom would have been proud?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. Lily's expression softened, and she placed her hand on mine. "I think she would have been over the moon," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "She would have loved to see us together, loved to see Emma and Lucy grow up knowing each other. She would have been proud of all of us." The thought of my mother filled me with a mixture of love and longing. I could almost see her sitting across from us, her warm smile lighting up the room, her eyes filled with pride and joy. I knew she would have been happy to see the family we had built, even if it wasn't the way we had expected. It was still ours, and that was enough. As the afternoon wore on, the cafe became quieter, the soft hum of conversation and the clink of cups and plates around us, creating a sense of calm that I had come to appreciate. I looked at my new family, at Lily, at Emma, and at Lucy, and for the first time in a long while, I felt completely whole. The past was still there, lingering like a shadow, but it no longer defined me. It no longer haunted me. We were creating new memories now, new traditions, and I couldn't have asked for anything more. The kids were now sitting on the floor, playing with some colorful crayons they had found. As I watched them, I realized that this was the beginning of a new chapter, one that would carry us forward, one filled with love, laughter, and the kind of connection I had always dreamed of but never thought possible. We had found each other, and we would face whatever came next, as a family, together. The next few weeks passed in a blur, each day blending into the next as we settled into this new rhythm, this new life that felt both familiar and entirely foreign. It was as though we were all learning to breathe in sync, each of us finding our place in this puzzle that had suddenly come together. There were still moments of adjustment, moments where I felt the weight of everything that had happened, but they were fewer now. The bond between Lily and me grew stronger with each passing conversation, each shared experience. And as for Emma and Lucy, their bond was unshakable. It was as if they had always been sisters. No time lost, no distance between them. One evening, as the days grew shorter and the nights colder, we all gathered at Lily's house for dinner. The kitchen was filled with the sounds of laughter, the clinking of utensils, and the warmth of a meal being prepared. Emma and Lucy were running around the house, pretending to be explorers on a grand adventure, while Lily and I set the table, talking about everything and nothing. It was a simple scene, but one that filled me with an overwhelming sense of gratitude. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. As I handed Lily a bowl of salad, I paused, glancing around the room at our children. "I never imagined this," I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. "I never thought I'd have all of this again. A family. A place that feels like home." Lily looked at me, a soft smile crossing her face. "I don't think any of us imagined it," she replied. "But sometimes, life surprises us in ways we can't predict. We find what we need when we least expect it." Her words hung in the air for a moment, and I realized just how true they were. Life had led us down winding paths, through grief, uncertainty, and loneliness. And yet here we were, standing together in this moment as a family. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was ours. We sat down to eat, the table piled high with food, the atmosphere light and full of conversation. Emma and Lucy were still giggling, their energy filling the space with joy. I couldn't help but watch them, their laughter echoing through the room like a song I had almost forgotten existed. They were a living testament to the fact that, despite everything we had been through, love was still possible. New bonds could be formed, new families could be built, and old wounds could begin to heal. Later, as the evening wound down and the kids were tucked into bed, Lily and I sat on the couch, sipping tea and talking about everything and nothing. The house was quiet now, the only sound the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. I leaned back against the couch, feeling the weight of the day lift off my shoulders. "You know," I said after a long pause, "I always thought that I was alone in this. I thought I had lost everything when Mom passed away. But now I realize that wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something new." Lily nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I think we've both learned that family isn't just what we're born into. It's what we choose, and we've chosen each other." Her words settled over me like a warm blanket, and I let out a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. The road to get here hadn't been easy. It had been filled with heartache, confusion, and moments of doubt. But sitting here now with Lily, with Emma and Lucy, I knew that every step had been worth it. This was the life we had built. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And that in itself was enough. As I looked around the room, I realized that this was no longer a house. It was a home. A place filled with love, laughter, and the promise of more memories to come. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what the future held, we would face it together. Life has a way of surprising us, often leading us down unexpected paths. Embrace the uncertainty and the detours, for sometimes the most profound connections and healing come when we least expect them. Don't be afraid of change or loss. These experiences, as difficult as they may seem, can pave the way for new beginnings and deeper connections. Family isn't just defined by blood. It's built on love, trust, and the willingness to open your heart to others. Keep moving forward, stay open to new relationships, and remember that even in the darkest times, something beautiful can emerge.